The full brain hazard. Why cognitive load is the silent killer. Imagine your brain is like a high-end smartphone. It's capable of incredible things, processing complex data, navigating GPS, streaming video, and running a dozen background apps all at once. But we've all been there. You open one too many apps, the battery starts to drain, the screen gets hot to the touch, and suddenly the whole thing freezes. You click send on an email, but nothing happens. You try to swipe and the lag is unbearable. In the world of occupational safety, we often focus on the physical environment. We look for trip hazards, faulty wiring, or missing guardrails. But the most dangerous hazard on any job site isn't something you can see with your eyes. It's cognitive load, the mental lag that happens when a worker's brain is simply too full to function safely. When we talk about mental health at work and employee safety engagement, we have to talk about the bandwidth of the human mind. If the apps in a worker's head are taking up 99% of their processing power, they don't have the 1% left over to notice a forklift backing up or a pressure gauge hitting the red zone. The science of the full cup. To understand why this happens, we have to look at the neuroscience of how we process information. This is often referred to as cognitive load theory. Originally developed by educational psychologist John Sweller, this theory suggests that our working memory has a limited capacity. Think of your working memory as a small cup. You can only fit so much liquid in it before it starts spilling over the sides. In the context of safety science, that liquid is everything a worker has to deal with. Instructions from a supervisor, the noise of the machinery, personal stress from home, and the actual technical steps of the job. There are three types of cognitive load that fill this cup. Intrinsic load. This is the inherent difficulty of the task itself. Performing surgery has a higher intrinsic load than sweeping a floor. You can't really change this without changing the job. Extraneous load. This is the noise. It's the poorly written safety manual, the confusing labels on a control panel, or a supervisor shouting over a loud engine. This is unnecessary weight on the brain. Germane load. This is the good load. It's the mental effort required to create a permanent map or habit in the brain. This is how we learn to work safely by instinct. The problem? When extraneous load, the noise, is too high, there is no room for germane load, the learning. The cup overflows, and that's when the silent killer strikes. Why cognitive load is a silent killer? We call it a silent killer because, unlike a physical hazard, you can't see a full brain on a walkthrough. A worker might look perfectly fine on the outside while their prefrontal cortex is screaming for a break. When the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for complex decision-making and impulse control, becomes overloaded, it begins to shut down to save energy. The brain shifts from executive function to survival mode. In this state, the brain stops looking at the big picture. It starts taking shortcuts. These shortcuts are called heuristics. Heuristics are mental rules of thumb that help us make quick decisions. Usually they are helpful, but when a brain is under high cognitive load, these shortcuts become dangerous. A worker might think, I've done this 1,000 times. I don't need to check the Loto, lockout tagout one more time. Or, I'll just reach in quickly while the machine is cycling. It'll save me 2 minutes. These aren't bad workers making bad choices. These are overloaded brains trying to manage a full cup by dumping out the most annoying or time-consuming pieces of information, which, unfortunately, are often the safety protocols. The science-to-life bridge, the browser tab metaphor. If you want to explain this to your team without sounding like a textbook, use the browser tab metaphor. Tell them, your brain is like a computer. Right now, you've got a tab open for the task you're doing. You've got another tab open for the music playing in the background. You've got a tab open worrying about the car repair you have to pay for tomorrow. And you've got a tab open because you're annoyed at the person in the next station. When you have 20 tabs open, your computer crashes. When your brain has 20 tabs open, you miss the hazard right in front of you. By framing it this way, you remove the stigma. You aren't telling them they aren't tough enough. You're explaining a biological reality of the human machine. The impact on employee safety engagement. High cognitive load is the enemy of employee safety engagement. You can have the best safety culture in the world, but if your employees are mentally exhausted, they won't engage. Research shows that chronic cognitive overload leads to increased levels of cortisol, the stress hormone. High cortisol levels over a long period can actually shrink the parts of the brain responsible for memory and emotional regulation. This is where mental health at work intersects with physical safety. When people are stressed and overloaded, they disengage. They stop participating in safety meetings. They stop reporting near misses. They stop looking out for their coworkers. They aren't being lazy. Their brains are simply in a defensive crouch, trying to survive the shift. Practical advice for leaders: how to empty the cup.
So how do we fix a hazard we can't see? As a leader, your job is to be a load manager. Here are 4 practical ways to reduce the cognitive load on your team.
1. Simplify the extraneous. Look at your safety procedures. Are they 50-page manuals written in legalistic jargon? That is massive extraneous load. Simplify. Use visuals, icons, and chunked information. A clear 3-step visual guide on a workstation is infinitely safer than a perfect 100-page document in a binder in the office. 2. Respect the neural pause. Encourage your team to take micro breaks. Science shows that even a 60-second reset where a worker steps away from the task, breathes, and clears their mental tabs can significantly lower cortisol levels and restore executive function. Make it okay to pause. 3. Standardize to create muscle memory. The more a task becomes a habit, the less cognitive load it requires. This is why pilots use checklists and why athletes practice the same move 1,000 times. By standardizing safety checks until they are automatic, you move that task from the high-energy prefrontal cortex to the lower-energy basal ganglia. You're literally making safety easier for the brain to process. 4. Practice psychological unloading.
Before a high-risk task, try a pre-task brief that isn't just about the tools. Ask the team, what's distracting us today? Give them a chance to verbalize the open tabs in their heads. Once a distraction is acknowledged, the brain often stops working so hard to keep it in the foreground.
The future of safety. Watching brains, not just hands. For decades, safety has been about watching what people do with their hands. We check for gloves, we check for harnesses, we check for speed. But as we move into a more complex, fast-paced industrial world, the real front line is the human mind. The silent killer of cognitive load doesn't have to be a mystery. By understanding the neuroscience of how we process information, we can design workplaces that work with the human brain instead of against it. When we reduce the mental weight our teams are carrying, we don't just see fewer accidents. We see higher engagement, better mental health, and a team that actually has the bandwidth to care about coming home safe. Empty the cup, close the tabs. Let the brain do what it does best. Stay aware, stay sharp, and stay safe.